A new copy of the syllabus to you guys. Raise your hand if you need lesson 11. Jason has those. We are off a little bit. I will tell you this. Lesson 12 will probably go 2 times instead of 1. So lesson 12, it's available today. Jason will hand that out at the end. On the top of the page on lesson 12, I do have 2 dates. So I have Wednesday's date and Sunday's date, so we know what we're going to be covering. Because I think lesson 12 is another one of those challenging sections that is really, really applicable to us in this culture that we're really going to need to spend some time on. And so that's why I'm broadening it out to 2 different lessons. I will tell you as we begin our class this morning that we are being live streamed. We were not live streamed on Wednesday night. We are being live streamed today, and we're going to have a discussion on whether or not we want some of these others live streamed moving forward. I did appreciate Wednesday's class, the open communication that we had, and everybody feeling free to share ideas. And I thought that was very helpful, and I thought it was extremely helpful to the younger people who are still in the process of raising their children. They got to hear a lot of different views from a lot of different good, godly men and women who were in a lot of different positions. And Shelley and I talked about this. We would, have, in an ideal world for us, we may have waited for our kids to work till they got in college, but that wasn't ideal for us. We just couldn't do it. And you can't feel guilty about something that you couldn't do. And so what you were able to see how different people handled that. And my challenge to you, or my suggestion to you, is try to find someone who might be in similar situations at you. So somebody who might be like, all right, financially we're in a similar situation. I can't do the ideal, so how did they handle what might not be the ideal situation? Does that make sense? Just like I was having this conversation with someone, just like if you need help with your marriage, the best people for you to go to, obviously our elders would be a great choice, but we have so many good families here who have had great marriages. Finding a couple whose personalities are similar to your personalities. Because for instance, if you have a wife with a more of a natural submissive personality as opposed to a natural leader personality, you're not going to get good advice typically, because if the woman that you're going to advice for has a totally different personality than you, and so living that way is easy for her, that's just her normal way, you're going to have a struggle if that's something that you struggle with. Does that make sense? So you find somebody who's like you, who's experienced your life a couple years ahead of you. That's why we have that H2H class called multi-generational. What is it? Multi-generational relationships, right? Because we want people to develop relationships with people who are older and younger than them so that we can help along the way. And so that would be my 2 cents then for that. But we are streaming today's service. So welcome everybody who is watching online. Let's go ahead and have a word of prayer. God, we are so grateful for families. We are so grateful for the good families that we have here at PSD. We're thankful that you have carried so many of us through dark times and difficult challenges that we faced as the devil has tried to destroy our families. And with your help and by your grace and by the help of other people who are in this room and other people who have crossed our paths, we are still standing, trying our best to honor you in our families. We pray that you'll be with our families, that they'll be strong, and that they'll have good relationships. We thank you today especially for parents, and help us to learn to honor our parents as we become adults and our parents are aging. We love you. We pray that, thanking you for being such a good father. Help us as we study. Through Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, so today's topic is honor your parents. And this is mostly directed to all of us in this room who still have parents alive. And what does it look like for grown people, adults who have their own families, to still honor their parents? Because the command or the instruction to honor the parents was really given to grown-ups. It wasn't necessarily given to kids. Obeying was given to kids. Honor was given to grown-ups. And so we're going to look a little bit about what that means today and how that relates to our particular situation. But let me start out. We have microphones. If you have something you want to say, raise your hand. Bring a microphone to you. Speak in your microphone. Don't wave the microphone around. It'll mess everything up. Let me just ask this. This isn't one of our questions, but what to you, going into the class especially, what do you think of when you think of honoring your parents? What comes to your mind? Does anything come to your mind when you think of honoring your mother and your father? Jason?
Being grateful.
Okay.
I have snapshots in my head of shameful and horrible moments in my life, and many of them involve being ungrateful to my mom and dad when I was younger. I hope I express gratitude to my mom at this point in my life, but I have many horrid moments. We forget sometimes. As young people, we are focused on ourselves. We become very egocentric and very self-oriented. I'm not going to say narcissistic, but that type of tendency. And we take our parents for granted. We take the fact that they give us everything. They give us a place to live, they give us clothes, they give us food, they give us all kinds of amenities, toys, whatever. And sometimes we act like that's a right. Okay. And gratitude will reshape your relationship with your parents.
All right. Gratitude, appreciation, and not taking them for granted. Because you probably did take it for granted when you were a kid, right? So you just assumed they were going to take care of you, and you just took that for granted. And as you're grown up, you look back at that, and maybe that mindset changes a little bit, and you're more grateful for all the things they did for you growing up. And so those are good concepts. Anybody else? Gratitude, appreciation. All right. Mike and Terry both have something. It's a race. We'll let Mike go first because I saw Mike's hand first.
I guess it's at different stages of your life, but at the stage I'm at now is when you have to take care of them. When you have to get that phone call and then leave work and go over there. Or I had 2 phone calls just now in the morning service with him. So you just have to kind of put them first. And it's real inconvenient at times. Sometimes it's bloody, and but you got to do what you got to do.
Okay. So it is a sense of duty, but a duty that is not something that you begrudge. It's something that you do because that's what you're supposed to do. That's what God wants you to do. And you love them, and they did a lot for you. So you gotta view it that way. Terry?
I would say care and concern, showing care and concern toward your parents. And then also, as they age, you have to remember that they still have free will. They can still make decisions, for themselves that you may or may not agree with. And it's very difficult if you don't agree with that decision. If you don't think that's a very wise move, you have to honor them enough to allow them to make it. Okay. So the same as with children, you have to allow them to fail. And just like with your parents, you have to give them the freedom to fail or succeed, know.
All right, we're going to talk about, we're going to get a little deeper into this in our next lesson. That's why it's going to take 2 as far as how does that work? What conversations do you need to have? When do you need to have these conversations? How do you go about making these decisions together as a family instead of waiting to the point where, because what you say is absolutely true. At the same time, there becomes a moment or a point in some of our parents' lives where they are no longer able to make decisions. And that puts it another huge level over this, that what do I do when my parents are no longer able to make decisions for themselves? How do I have that conversation that, hey, it's probably better if you don't drive? Those are tough things. We're going to get more specifically on that next time, because I think those are valuable things that we have to figure out. Because I think a lot of us have been going through those. A lot of us are on the verge of having to go through some of those tough decisions. And it's better to be proactive and figure all that out. So, yeah, very good. All right, so let's look at a couple passages here. The Exodus chapter 20 and verse 17 passage is the giving of the 10 Commandments. In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12, it says, "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you." And then in Ephesians chapter 6, Paul repeats it in verses 2 through 3, where it says, "Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with you, and that you may live long on the earth." So Paul is confirming that you should honor your mother and father. Now, Paul is writing to a bunch of kids or grown-ups. He's writing to grown-ups. At the beginning, when God is giving the law in Exodus chapter 20, all of them are assembled. Kids as well, but all of them are assembled, and this is not something that it ends when you leave home. The command to honor your mother and father lasts a lifetime, and I think it lasts even after your mother and father have passed. There are ways to continue to honor your parents even after they've died. And so I think that's an important thing for us to talk about. Now, I think there is a crucial and important difference here. It's critical that we understand this. Children are the ones commanded to obey their parents. Grown-ups are commanded to honor their parents. And I believe there is a difference. What is the progression that God puts for the family? What happened when you left home? And let's say you got married. What happened at that point to the whole dynamic of the family? Somebody raise your hand and answer this one for us. Emery, he had a smile on his face like he knew the answer to this one and he wanted to share it. It's right behind you.
Leave and cleave.
Exactly.
It's when that is a separate unit that is formed, it's one flesh, and it becomes its own autonomous family at that point. And it's very, very hard, not as a parent, not to get into that family unit.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things there. And this goes back to the golden rule. When you left your household and you got married to your spouse and you had two different units now, what did you expect from your parents? What did you want from them? You wanted to be respected as your own unit. You wanted them to now sort of respect that you're a grown-up and you're responsible for your own family. You wanted that. And so if that's what you wanted when you left home, what do you think you should give your kids when they leave home? That same thing. And I'm not saying it's easy, it's challenging, but that is the order that God has put into it. So when you leave home, you still have the responsibility to honor your parents, but you really don't have the responsibility to obey your parents like you did when you were 10 or 11 or 12. You're your own person. You make your own decisions, and they have to allow that. They have to allow you. They can give you wisdom. They can give you counsel. You should ask for wisdom and counsel, but they have to allow you to make your own decisions and to fail. That's why if you make bad decisions, as sort of Terry's been talking about, giving them the chance to fail. As young married couples, did you all take advantage of the opportunity to fail at some point? I think we probably all took advantage of the freedom to fail, and we made some mistakes that our parents probably could have talked us out of if we just listened to them. But that's part of the process that God put in place. So when we're talking about the honor part of it, we have to understand that we're not obligated as grown-ups to do what our parents tell us to do. As a matter of fact, we're obligated as grown-ups to have an independent family unit and make decisions with your spouse. When you're married now, your wife, for a husband's sake, your wife and her needs and her wants supersede what your parents want for in your life and what the decisions your parents want you to make. Does that make sense? And I think that's God's plan. You can still listen to counsel. So I think there's a huge difference there. Some parents might want, you know what, it would just be easier if my kids, even when they're 25 and 30 and 40, if they would just do what I say, right? That's not good. Yeah. We have some people, yeah, it would be. That's just not God's plan. You have to allow for that. But I can honor my mom and dad and not do what they say because I have my own decision. I know more what's going on in my life and around me. They've trained me to get me to this point. Isn't that the purpose, right? They've trained me to the point where I'm capable of making good decisions. I'm going to fail, but I'm able to do that. They've allowed me. They give me every resource I need so that I can stand together with my spouse as a couple and we could make the best choices that God wants us to make for our family. Does that make sense? So I think we just got to get this in mind. You don't, as a grown-up, you don't have to do everything your parents say. And if you have kids who are grown-ups, they don't have to do everything you say either. And you're going to have to start learning that. Now, we'll talk on Wednesday and Sunday. What happens, how do you handle it if you have a whole bunch of grown-ups living together? That can pose an extra burden of, not a burden, but just you're going to have some more of this. You have, in my case, we have 3 adult men living in the same house, right? So is there going to be conflict sometimes between 3 adult men living in the same house? Yeah, there is. Are they more obligated, do you think, to do what I want them to do if they're living in a house that I'm paying for than if they move out? Those are conversations that have to be made. That's what we'll continue to talk about later on. So let's go ahead. Let's say your mom wants you to move back to your hometown because your job, that's where your parents live, and so they just put a lot of pressure on you to stay home. Don't move. Don't move. How do you handle that as a kid if your parents are trying to put pressure on you and your family to stay close, even though you have a job that's better suited for you and your family if you move 6 hours away or 12 hours away or all the way across the country? That's a tough one, right? The parents have to allow the kids to make their choices. They can give all the advice they want, but in the bottom line, they got to say, you know what? This is your decision. You can make it the way you want. And I see so many parents, even when it comes to, this is my perspective. You guys raise your hand if you totally disagree with me on this, and you can give your 2 cents. Actually, there's no cents anymore. You can give your 2 nickels, I guess. When it comes time for your kids to go, if they go to college, they need to go to the college that best suits their goals and their what their future looks like, not necessarily the college that you want them to go to. And if that requires them moving, I moved from Indiana to Florida to go to college, and my parents never said not to do that. Was it hard for my parents to see me move away? Because they probably knew that once he's gone, he's probably gone. I went home for 2 summers after that, and that was it. I was gone. But they never put any undue pressure on me to stay there and go to school there. All right, anybody have any thoughts on that before I move on? Correct me, tell me I'm wrong. And I do understand this. If the parents are paying for the education, they might have a little more say-so in it. But at the same time, they still have to realize that they're making this decision because this particular school has a good engineering department, and my kid wants to be an engineer. I'd be holding them back if I had them go to this school if that's what they wanted to go to. All right, so discussion question number 1. Let's deal with that one. All right, older adults, how has your relationship of honoring your parents changed from when you were 25 to now? And what does honor look like when your parents are elderly or have passed? We had a couple of those already. So anybody else want to answer this when you've been thinking? All right, we have 2 up here. We have 3. All right, Abigail?
Yes, so not everybody knows this, but both of my parents are now gone. And a way that I think of honoring them is by remembering what we talked about before they passed and respecting what they asked me to do personally. But also, one major thing for both of them was my relationship with God. They, from the time I can remember, had instilled in me and my siblings how important God was. And There are some days where I may not want to come to church, but because I am hurting at that time, I not only think of God, but I think of them. And it really makes me happy.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abigail. So you have the idea of respecting what they taught you, even after they've gone, and then honoring some of the requests they've made of you after they're gone, and thinking about, I think you can still think about, what would mom and dad do on this particular moment? In addition to that, as far as our parents who are gone, you can honor them by keeping their memories alive with your kids and your grandkids, right? You can honor them by talking about them to your kids and grandkids. That's a way of honoring them. Let me ask you this. How many of you would like for your kids and your grandkids to talk to your great-grandkids about you in positive terms? Anybody would like that? To think about the good about you and talk about that to your grandkids? I want that. So if that's the case, I should probably be doing that for my parents and my grandparents, talking positively about them to others. So I know that's hard sometimes. Sometimes when our parents are passed, we're emotional about that, and we have a hard time talking. But sometimes I think we have to probably just take a deep breath and say, this is good for honoring my parents, and it's good for my kids as well. Phil has had his hand up. If you want to get one to him, Mary, you're up.
Oh, okay. Well, basically, I'm just going to repeat what's just been said. But when I had my problems with my parents, but when I left home, I realized how lucky I was to have them, because you see people in far worse situations with their parents. So I think it's to stop trying to get us always for them to approve of everything I did and said, but more like understanding that we're all human and they are human. And then when I cared for them before they died, it was about having respect for their feelings. They did have those discussions with us and got their affairs in order, and I'm grateful that they did that, because it made things a lot easier. So, but honoring their feelings as they lost their independence is important, and I would, I can transmit their legacy to my kids. I do have good things I can tell them about them. So.
Very good. Yeah. So through the course of time, in Mary's life, she sort of changed in the way that she approached her parents and respected her parents and honored her parents, from the time she was younger to the time she was barely out of the house to the time that they were really old, and she had to take care of them. And honoring their request of what happens after they die is, I think, a way that you can honor them as well. Bill?
Yeah, I had a different experience being adopted. I knew that I was lucky to have parents. But as a young boy, I was the type that wanted to please my parents. I had a brother who didn't. And sometimes we'd get in trouble. We fought a lot between the boys, sibling rivalry. And it created a lot of angst, with mom and dad, because they didn't want to have to lay the law down every time we had a thing. But my dad, my picture of my dad and my perception of all this that led me to honor him started first with the idea that he adopted me. Second, that I wanted to please him and I could look up to him as a father, someone I could respect, someone who had authority over me that I wasn't afraid of. But later, through the years after we got married, he and my mom were very good at honoring us as the newlyweds, and they would not butt in. So when we had a problem, they'd wait for us to call them, and they wouldn't initiate it. And we tried not to call them too much. We wanted to be on our own and do our thing, And I learned over time, as my dad, he's just turned 96, but a while back, after my mom died, my dad expressed a great concern for my brother and his situation, which was not good. And he always wanted to make sure he was taken care of. And I would listen to him say this over and over again, and it took several months for me to come to him and say, Dad, I made a special trip to go up and see him. And I said, Dad, I'm listening now. I understand what you're asking. He wanted me to take that burden off of him and to take it from him. So I honored him in that way by trying to say, Dad, listen, I promise you I'll never let him go hungry. I'll make sure that he has food. And I said, Dad, I want to take this off of you because you took so much for me growing up. And I said, I want to honor you in that way because you don't deserve that burden. And I'm glad to take it. And I saw the relief on his face as he realized the burden was being lifted off of him and put on my shoulders. And so I have an idyllic view of my parents because of all that. So I want to honor them. Sure. And I recognize they didn't always do the right things with us. But I think over time, as everybody says, you look back and you realize there was more good than bad there, and that things you can honor your parents. Sure. And if you have trouble doing that, I would encourage you to pretend to look at your parents like they're 7 and 8 years old, because sometimes they're going to make bad mistakes too and not realize it till later, and they can't fix it because it's already happened. But in order to grow and mature in your honor for them and your respect for them, remember, there are people like us that make mistakes, and they should be forgiven as well.
Okay. Very good. So how many of you had perfect parents? No, nobody had perfect parents. How many of you, if you set your mind to it, could think of a lot of bad things, decisions your parents made? If that's what you wanted to focus on, and you could grow resentment if you tried. Probably you could. I mean, most of us could. I mean, all my kids have if they wanted to focus on all the bad things I did and the mistakes I made, and that's all they wanted to think about, yeah, they could. We all are that way, right? We all are a mixed bag. We all make decisions that are bad. We all make mistakes. And I think both of you pointed out that at some point you and I've said this multiple times, you do have to realize your parents were raised by flawed people too. And they were raised by people who didn't have it all figured out. And so they are carrying some of that around with them. And that was, unfortunately, some of that was passed on to you. And you have to sort of look at the good. And that's one thing we tried to emphasize early on in this class. Everybody in this world has good qualities, almost everybody, if you're looking for them. And I would suggest that most of your parents have a lot of really good qualities if you set out to look for them. And I think that's the way that we honor everybody, is to look at the good in people and look at for what their successes and what they've done to help you instead of what they've done to hurt you. And so I think both of you have touched on that, which I think is very, very important. Now, as with Phil, and he had a unique situation in that he was adopted. A couple others in the audience were also adopted. But a lot of us had parents that were a whole bunch more good than bad. Some of you didn't, and I feel for you, and I wish you had parents that had a whole bunch more good than bad, and I hope you're able to pass on a whole bunch more good to your kids than bad. But most of us, if we're really serious about it, I think Dave's already pointed about how his mom's still his hero and the way that she's working out and helping people at church. A lot of us had that, and so we're blessed that we have grown up in that kind of environment. We want to pass that on to our children. Let's look at some more verses. Leviticus 19 and verse 3. Leviticus 19 and verse 3 says, "Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God." This revere carries with it a sense of awe and deep respect. Do you remember when you were in awe of your parents? Anybody have a moment where they were just in awe of their parents in a moment and you want to share with us? Mine's a little silly, sort of silly. I'll share mine with you while you think. I don't know how old I was. My dad used to work midnights some, and my dad was really strong. And my neighbor was out lifting his weights. He was in high school, and he was lifting his weights. All this good stuff. It was one of those, you remember those dumbbells you used to get with 110 pounds on it? It came with 110 pounds of concrete weights. The whole thing weighed 110 pounds. And he's out there lifting, and all this getting real big. I said, my dad could do that with one hand. Now, I'm like right outside my dad's window, and he's like, there's no possible way your dad could lift that over his head with one hand. Impossible. My dad could do it, you know? And my dad heard through the window somehow. He was asleep. And I don't know if my mom went and said something to him, but he came out the door. He walked around to the weight set, the 110-pound weight set. With one hand, he took the 110 pounds, lifted it over his head like that. And the neighbor was just like, oh, believe it. He did that with one other guy, a grown man, and the grown man said, I will never lift those weights again. It was just in that moment, Dad couldn't do anything. Any of you have an experience like that? All right. Ooh, we're going to... Lydia here has an experience like this. Now, someone needs to put some pressure on Matt's head, maybe. Doesn't get a big head.
Well, it's not like one specific moment, but I'm very much in awe of Mom and Dad and how they've changed over the years. And I know everyone, changes as they get older, but I feel like Mom and Dad have made like such drastic improvements as they've gotten older, and they've taught us how to have important conversations, and I've seen them grow and change in ways that is so impressive to me, and it's very awe-inspiring. And like even watching back like home videos of them when they were in like college and stuff, I'm like, I don't even know how they are where they are now. They were just kind of crazy, but it's so awe-inspiring that they have become the people that they are right now. And I hope that I'm able to change that much as I get older.
All right, very good. So, I mean, do kids watch their parents grow up too?
Yep.
I think so. I think we don't look at it that way, but our parents are growing right before our eyes, just like we're growing before their eyes. And so they have a lot to learn, as we had a lot to learn as we parent. I'm not the same person I was when my kids were little, and hopefully it's a little bit better in some areas. Proverbs 23:22 says, "Listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old." Proverbs 30 and verse 17 says, "The eye that mocks his father and scorns obedience to his mother, the ravens of the valley will pick it out, and the young eagles will eat it." That's pretty strong language. How does God feel about people respecting their parents? Pretty significant to him, right? It's not minor to him. So, Debbie, go ahead and say what you're going to say, and then we'll ask the next question. Oh, all right, Abigail.
Well, going back to what we were just talking about, I had to share this because I find it kind of funny. But I also I used to do horseback riding for 17 years. And that also was a way that me and my dad bonded. Well, one day I was doing a horse show, and it ended up being a life lesson because while I'm in the ring, my horse started to act up. We had no idea why. I could not get control of the horse. My dad could not get control of the horse. So, long story short, I ended up getting a crash course in how to jump. And so whenever the horse went over the fence, I obviously fell off. I think it was over the head. And I immediately just saw black. I could not see one thing. And because that happened, as a reaction, I started to roll, like they teach you in school, to put out a fire, because I didn't want to sit up in case the horse was still there and still rearing and whatnot to get knocked down again. So I rolled, and my dad, whenever I stopped rolling, thankfully my sight came back, and it was my dad and the judge that had come to see if I was okay. And after I asked them, did I at least make it over the jump? Did all 4 hooves hit the ground before I fell? And my dad's like, yes, now you need to get back up and get on the horse. I didn't even have time to ask for a drink because I had literally eaten sand. But he was so afraid that I would never get back up unless he put me back up. So every day I keep thinking of that lesson. And I ended up brushing the sand out of my teeth for that whole week.
So yeah, there's a moment where your dad does something that impacts your entire life, and in that moment he's bigger than life, that he just knew the right thing to do in that moment for you. And that becomes very special. Debbie, and then we'll move on.
Just quickly, I'm also like Phil. I was adopted, and I was always I looked up to my dad, really respected him and honored him because he came from kind of a very tough background. He lost his parents when he was young, and he was kind of raised by his sisters. He didn't have great examples, but when he married my mom, he apparently just changed radically and became a very good dad, very caring, very protective of us. But the thing that impressed me, it was he was always very respected in our community and at work. He always got rave reviews for just being a man of integrity, a man who was very hardworking. He was responsible for handling a lot of money for the military and as a contractor. And he went on and went to school, got his master's degree while I was growing up. He would stay up late at night studying. He always had time for us. He always had time. He took me to Girl Scouts and everything. But he just was even I was looking at some cards that I have of his. He's passed away now, but I'm cleaning out my mom's condo, and I was looking at cards, and just so many cards said, we always saw Charlie walking around whistling and happy, and he was always good to people. He was very well respected in the community, and I learned a lot of my work ethics and just my working hard and working up and, looking up to him for all that he taught me.
Yeah, very good. So more of not just a one moment, but just a lifetime of good sacrifice and good example. So look at hopefully you had the chance to consider these passages that I have in the outline. The Ruth and Naomi, how they operated in respect towards one another. You have Joseph and Jacob. At the end of their life, who's in charge, Joseph or Jacob? Joseph. Who's making the decisions on everyday life, where they're going to live and all that good stuff? It's Joseph. Now, does Joseph still respect his father? Absolutely. He honors the request to take his bones back to the promised land. So that's a part of honoring it. So they had this relationship where that happened. We've looked at recently Jesus on the cross. He's honoring his mother by making sure that she was cared for after he died. Negative examples, Ham and Noah was a bad one. Absalom and David, that was a mess. Okay, that was a mess. Absalom did not honor David, and David was too passive towards Absalom when he first, when his brother Amnon did something bad. He should have dealt with Amnon when Amnon did something bad. Then maybe Absalom wouldn't have been put in the position he was in. So David messed up some, but Absalom had no excuse for treating David the way he did. And the Pharisees' loophole. The loophole was, all right, I know that honoring my parents means, in part, financially helping them. As grown-ups, that's what it sometimes comes down to. And our culture is different than the culture here in the sense of not all of our parents, but most of our parents are going to be able to provide their basic necessities up through the end of their life with retirement, with Social Security, all the things that happen. They had no safety nets like that. And so the number one way of taking care of older people, it happened mostly on the backs of the children, which is probably still a better system. The government has come and taken that responsibility away to say we're going to take on the responsibility. So sometimes it has left some kids saying they have retirement, they have Social Security for that. So there is a chance that that's going to happen. In our life, a lot of our parents are going to have to move in with us. In our lifetime, some of our parents might have to go to another facility that we're going to have to help pay for. And so there are going to be these financial obligations. and that's part of it. So the question number 3 is younger adults. Jason's going to pass out next week's lesson. What is the most challenging about honoring your parents now that you're married with your own children? How do you balance your parents' expectations with your spouse's needs and your own family decisions? You don't have to be young to answer this question. You can tell us how you did it. For some, as Phil noted, it came pretty naturally. Your parents knew to honor you by allowing you to make your own decisions. I think we've been blessed in our marriage. Our parents sort of honored that leaving and cleaving, and they didn't get mixed up in the everyday affairs of our business. One advantage to us, I think it was an advantage to us. I can't say that I recommend this. You have to do what you want to do, what's right with your family. I thought it was good that we moved away from both sets of our parents for a while, because that forced us to be more independent, and mom and dad weren't living next door, so you couldn't go run to mom and dad all the time. We lived in Houston. Mom and dad lived in Indiana. Shelly's parents lived in Tennessee. It was a 20-hour drive to my parents' house and a 14-hour drive to her parents' house. But I think starting off the marriage, that laid a good, positive separation. And so that sometimes that's what happens. Well, how do you honor parents that were just bad parents? Are there parents that were just low down, no good? I don't want to say too much, but just didn't fulfill their responsibility to you. How, as Christians, do you honor them? It's harder, isn't it? Think that'd be harder? If you were abandoned by your mom or dad at some point, and now God, just like the wedding vows, they're not conditional. God doesn't say respect your parents if they always act respectfully or they deserve your respect. So how do you manage that situation if your parents aren't easy to respect based upon your life? Joy has one. Patrick has one up here too.
Well, as a Christian, we still have a responsibility to honor and respect them as our parents. It doesn't mean that we have to condone things they're doing that are wrong, but we have an obligation to them regardless of how they are.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
Yeah, I would say I've been blessed with good parents, but so my father passed away when I was a teenager, and my mom never remarried. And so I would say, like, the balance as an adult getting married has always been kind of, yes, my mom is alone, and so trying to make sure that, like, paying attention to her needs and what she wants. But at the same time, to your earlier point, I don't have this own unit that I'm responsible for and need to take care of and prioritize first. I'll just say those two things haven't always been in alignment as far as what my mother may want and what we think is best for our family. And so just trying to navigate that in the sense of honor your mother, respect what she wants, respect her wishes, but at the same time making what I and we feel are the best decisions for our family, even if that means not making my mother terribly happy about those decisions. And so I would say that's been kind of the challenge of just navigating the honor, but don't listen to, honor and take into account feelings, but at the same time doing what's right for us.
Yeah, and that's a unique situation in the fact that most of us, I'm assuming most of us when we got married still had our mom and dad both alive. And so you had an extra challenge there, and that your mom didn't have your dad to sort of balance that out and make sure she was taken care of. So some of that fell on you and you had to work that out. But most of us will have that in our life sometime where one of our parents will die before the other, and now they have a void in their life that the kids have to try to fill somehow while still having their own family. And that is a challenge that comes up. All right, Tim has something, and then we'll let Tim have the last word here. No pressure, brother.
I was going to say, don't discount honoring your parents by the way you live your life. In other words, you live a godly life, whether your parents were Christians or not, whether they were good parents or bad parents. The way you live your life for Christ and the way you sacrifice for Christ is one way that you can honor them, because involved in that is you're going to love them the way that Jesus loves. And that's part of being Christ-like and part of being a Christian. So live the Christian life the way it was intended, pattern it after Jesus, even when dealing with good parents or bad parents, and that speaks volumes. I don't see all my children as much as I would like to, but I do love the way they're living their lives, and it counts. And they are honoring me when they do that, and I can see that.
How much better does it make your life that your kids are all doing what you wanted to do? Now, that's not the case for all of us, and so that's another lesson we're going to talk about. What do we do when that happens? How do we navigate that? All right, everybody. Jason has handed out lesson 12, where we're going to get more practical and how to have these conversations, when to have these conversations, and how to make these decisions together.